So if you aren't caught up with the lore of Brendan Schaub's career in show business, you might not know that Brendan Schaub was actually an employee for a huge television network owned by Paramount Global, which is responsible for creating hit TV shows like Dexter, Homeland, and Shameless. And this job basically gave Brendan every tool he needed to be successful in Hollywood. All it would have taken was the slightest bit of effort. But in classic Brendan Schaub fashion, he threw this golden opportunity into the sink and pissed all over it. I mean, he was so bad at his job that Showtime terminated him only a couple of years later.
You know, I think a lot of time when people leave, you know, certain jobs and stuff like that, there's a sense of sadness, and that is not the case here.
But now, after several anonymous employees leaked new information about Schaub's experience with Showtime, we finally know the real reason as to why he was fired. Reason number one is that while working for Showtime, Brendan acted like an entitled, arrogant snob.
You fired up for 20 minutes. Yeah. And then you realize, like, that's not sustainable.
I don't know if
but
that
a
ever
sweet
goes
potato,
away.
you know, you're like learning how to.
I don't know if it ever goes away. I always have it. It's just controlling the monster. Like the chip on my shoulders, I couldn't tell you how tall it is.
Who put in zero effort, zero research, and zero preparation. And this was wildly evident in the talk show that Showtime gave to Brendan, Food Truck Diaries, where Showtime paid for huge names in the UFC to be on the show.
On this week's Food Truck Diaries, he's the only man in the world that I would leave my studio to do a food truck with. He's the scariest man to ever enter the ring. It's Mike Tyson.
Like, Brendan had it pretty easy. He could just let the guests talk while he led them through his questions because his guests were the reason people were tuning in. But of course, he single-handedly ruined the entire thing with his constant interrupting and unprofessionalism.
And I said, you know, this might not go over well with a lot of people because when you look at it, but as far as talent, pound for pound, Corey might be the most talented guy we've ever had. Do you feel pressure there? Because before you begin, so let's talk about the talent out of Colorado.
Like, the whole thing just felt slapped together. It was disingenuous, rushed, and cheap. Like, the only time the guests actually had time to speak was when Brendan was loudly shoveling slimy street food into his mouth.
So I was trying to do liver like once a week.
Almost like keto, right? Because you're doing high fat, it's more keto, right?
Yeah, I mean, once I...
And that was just one of the many shows Showtime funded for Brendan Schaub. He was also the host of Below the Belt, where he'd play pretend as a UFC analyst. And this is where Brendan's laziness truly shined, as he refused to stay up to date with even the most common UFC updates. Like when he didn't even know the company who sponsored the fight apparel an entire year after that deal took place.
Have you ever seen anybody rocking the fucking, well, I guess Reebok's out. They still do fight kits though, don't they? What? Venom does the fight kits now? Is it?
So pretty much the general consensus from the staff at Showtime was that they were relieved when Brendan finally got fired. Like, they all secretly despised him, which can be visibly seen on the faces of his fellow employees in this obscure talk show that Brendan did on Comedy Central, where he gets absolutely destroyed after rudely interrupting his co-host to disagree with her opinions on the Game of Thrones. Like, he seems to be doing an impression of a charismatic show host, but ends up just forcing everything that comes out of his mouth as he pisses everyone off around him. The second reason Brendan Schaub was fired from Showtime was because he refused to cover Bellator MMA at all, stating that he's a UFC guy and a UFC guy only. So Ariel Helwani swooped up the deal and did a fantastic job, in turn infuriating Brendan beyond belief.
I see Ariel's there.
Yeah.
How's that going over?
And I'm here.
No. But how's that?
How do you think he got the job?
But how's that going over?
I didn't want to do it. I God bless them. I don't know. You know, Showtime does their thing. I do my thing, man.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'll sleep in my bed tonight. I'm with you guys. Those boys are in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And look where Ariel Helwani is now. He's at the height of his career, while Brendan's forced to watch on his dwindling podcasts. It's also ironic that he insisted on just covering the UFC, since he's banned from all the UFC events after he destroyed his relationship with Dana White, which he remains extremely salty about to this day. Like whenever Bryan Callen goes to a fight and sits front row with Joe Rogan, Brendan Schaub discredits it by saying that front row seats actually suck, stating that you can't see anything and that seats in the back are actually better.
Now let's get to the fights.
And then the fights. Did you like sitting that close? It's a lot, huh?
I love it. Personally, if I'm going to watch the fights, it's and if you sit anywhere else, it's awful.
Oh, I disagree.
Really? You'd rather be where high up?
I'd rather be one level up, yeah. I don't like being close to the cage. Yeah, especially with the pillars and the cameraman and all that. I'd rather be above that. Yeah, so I can see everything.
Well, being that close and hearing the devastating sound of a guy like Alex Pereira's feet and fists. I mean, oof.
The real reason Brendan didn't want to cover Bellator for Showtime was because he was lazy and he didn't want to do any extra work. Like, Brendan was paid enough to afford a Hollywood mansion, numerous sports cars, and whatever his wife buys on the internet. He just wanted to get paid a good salary while phoning it in and being lazy and doing as little work as possible. But the final nail in the coffin was when Brendan wanted Showtime to film his next special, the Gringo Papi, which came just a couple years after they had just produced his utter disaster of a comedy special, You'd Be Surprised, where they painted Brendan as their next up-and-coming great, the next Bill Burr, the next Joe Rogan.
You ever been so high before you forget what language you speak? My high brain's like, bro, add to the conversation. I'm like, in what language though? Is that French? Do you speak French? I was so high. Remember Hulk Hogan in the 90s? Like he was chiseled out of freaking marble. Not anymore.
And in doing so, they ruined their entire reputation as producers of good comedy specials. And yet, Brendan still had the gall to demand that Showtime pay for all the production costs of the Gringo Papi, allegedly saying that Showtime owes him for all the new fans he brought to Showtime. And obviously, Showtime was not very happy with these demands. But the funniest part of it all is that after Brendan got fired, he tried to spin the false narrative that he decided to bet on himself.
It is official. I've decided to leave Showtime, and it's official January 1st. This isn't goodbye. This is, I'll see you later, man. I'm going to do my thing. They're doing their thing. They're doing great.
In reality, Brendan never planned on leaving Showtime. He thought he could just stay there forever and get paid to do basically nothing. And it seems that his remarketing has since failed. Because hey, what do you know? It's actually pretty tough to recreate the production value that Showtime handed to you on a silver platter. It's almost like this was a golden opportunity that any Joe Schmo could have rode with into the sunset. So to everyone who asks why people hate Brendan Schaub, this is one of the biggest reasons. He's a fraudster that parades around as things he's not, in hopes to peddle something to his dwindling fan base for cash. Nothing he creates holds any weight, which is why he burns every connection he's blessed with even having in the first place. And that's every reason that Brendan Schaub was fired from Showtime. And if you guys made it this far in the video, leave a like, subscribe, and comment what you think of the whole situation in the comments down below.
Let's say it goes how you think it's going to go. Khabib dominates. What's next? I'll tell you what I think.
Go ahead.
And one of the reasons I say this, because I heard you say this, so I put a lot of weight into it, is he's done.
Okay, so yes and no.
I think he retires. I don't think a Tony Ferguson, I don't think a Conor fight,